Welcome back to Oregon Public Retirement. I'm your host, Daniel Ryan, certified financial planner and IRS enrolled agent, as well as author of the book, Oregon Public Retirement. This is the financial planning playbook for Oregon public servants. Today, we are focusing on a very important topic, and that is answering the question, how do I calculate my pension? Today, I'm going to be focusing on Tier 1 in particular, because there's 3 different calculations, and it doesn't matter if you're in general service or police and fire. So we're going to walk you through each one of these calculations and why it's so important and what you can do to make the calculation the most in your favor. So without further ado, let's get into it. So today we are focusing on Tier 1 members only. If you are Tier 2 or OPSERP, then be sure to watch the other separate videos I have just tailor-made for you. If you're not sure what pension you fall into, if you were hired before the year 1996, you're in the right place. This is Tier 1 members only, and that's the cutoff for anyone who was hired as a Tier 1 person. You would be a Tier 2 person if you were hired between 1996 and August 28th of 2003. And if you've been hired since that point, you are in what we call OPSERP, or the Oregon Public Service Retirement Plan. What are we referring to? Well, I'm discussing the actual money for life that you will continue to receive each month throughout your retirement. What about my sick time? What about my vacation time? What about all these different factors? When will it be the most optimal for me to retire? And that's the answer that we're going to unpack, because if you are in money match calculation versus full formula and you don't know the difference, you can't win the game. Once you know the rules, you can finally win the game. And it answers the question, when can I retire at the optimal level? So let's first unpack what I would consider the most complex, yet the easiest, because nobody's really in this calculation anymore. And that is formula plus annuity. You had to have been hired before 1981 to actually be in this pension calculation, which basically means you've been doing this for 40 something years. Almost nobody. There is a sliver of just a handful of folks that fall into this category who have been working for 40 something years and they still haven't cashed in the pension yet. The way that we answer this question is we have a factor of 1% for general service, and then we multiply that by your salary. We take into basically account your account balance as well as your years of service and your age and basically everything that there is about you. I go a little bit more in depth in my book about this, but there's literally just a small handful of you that fall into this category. The only difference for legislators and police and fire is that you have a factor of 1.35%. So very, very few of you are going to fall into this category. So I don't want to spend too much time there, but that's in essence how the program works. It takes into account everything. Your age, your account balance, your sick time, your average salary, your years of service. It compiles all of that, gives you a factor, and then that gives you the income for life that you need. Let's spend some more time focusing on what's called money match. And that is the most popular from basically 25 years ago. That is how this came to be, that PERS was actually paying more in retirement than while you were working. It takes into account 2 things. Your account balance, which used to grow at a guaranteed 8% per year, and it then takes into account your age. The only thing that would be left is that it actually matches or doubles the amount from there, which it seems like that should be an easy calculation. Okay, my age times my account balance. Well, not quite. Your age is actually just what's called an actuarial equivalency factor. So for example, if you're age 60, then your AEF would be 6.80. If you're looking at a PERS statement, maybe you have a $375,000 account balance within PERS, because it used to be that you contributed into this account 6% of your salary, and then it would continue to grow at a guaranteed 8%. And as you can imagine, if you worked long enough and let that keep going, those account balances got pretty large. And that's when people actually started making more in retirement than while they were working. So if you have 0.0068 times $375,000, that would give you a monthly amount of $2,550. But wait, there's more. Then we have the match. And that is basically the employer's contributions, or effectively it's times 2. That gives you a monthly pension of $5,100 for the rest of your life each month. So that's how the money match calculation works. Now, why is it so difficult to calculate this just using numbers like I gave you? You have to find your exact AEF, actuarial equivalency factor. And there's a 200-page document that walks you through all of the different ages by the month that you actually retire. Well, that gets complicated. So it's not 6.8 for everybody. That's only if you are retiring right at age 60 and tier 1 member and all this other stuff that I just mentioned. Those are all very specific numbers. Now, if you're also wondering, well, where do I find my account balance? That's not something I know top of mind like I do my salary, for example. Well, that's again something you have to go to PERS and find out on your website on OMS, Online Member Services, or you can check the May statement that you get once a year, and it'll give you approximately what it is. The last thing you could do is do a written estimate, and that will certainly tell you on page 3 all of the different variations and run the exact calculation for you. So that is what Money Match takes into account. Now, let's talk about strategy for a second. Daniel, I have 2,000 hours of sick time, let's say. Where does that factor in if I know that Money Match is going to be how PERS calculates my benefit? I say it doesn't factor that in at all. That has nothing to do with your account balance. It has nothing to do with your age. Well, what do you do with that 2,000 of sick hours? Well, hopefully you have an employer that will actually pay that out to you, or at least a fraction of it. Because if you wait and see what full formula does, that will boost your pension. But if you don't have full formula and you're going to be under Money Match, having those sick hours saved up is not going to matter at all, which is kind of sad. So make sure you talk with your employer. There are a lot of union contracts that specifically outline once you get your notice of entitlement from PERS, let us have a copy of that, and we will then see that they did not take into account your sick time, and they will pay the sick time out to you. So be sure you know about this contract language, because that's pretty typical, and you at least get some of it back, right? Some fraction of that sick time back. Now, what about strategies like, hey, I'm ready to be done, okay, but I don't necessarily need the income right now because I have a spouse that's still going to be working. A lot of my clients are done working in their early 50s as a public servant. So you might very well be in a circumstance where you were planning on working another job anyways, maybe just not in the public sector. Or you have a spouse that's going to continue to work, and maybe you have a rental property that you're going to sell, and so you can live off that money, and you're trying to figure out, well, if I'm in Money Match, what's the benefit for me to just wait and not actually use this money out of my account? Well, the benefit would be that you continue to get the now 6.9% increase to the account balance every year that you don't take the pension, even if you're not working. And it also takes into account that you are older. So much like Social Security actually gives you a bigger dollar amount as you wait to take it till you're 70, PERS does a very similar style with this actuarial equivalency factor that will continue to get larger, goes from 6.8 to maybe 7.2 and so forth. And then you will notice that if you waited 5 more years, your pension might have gone up significantly. So some people say, well, what's the break even? That cumulative benefit where I could have started taking it at 60, but I decided to delay until 65. Or maybe I could have taken it at 52 and I delayed it till 60. That's where we want to start running some numbers. Because if you have a guaranteed income and it's going up at 6.9% guaranteed each year, you might want to use other assets like your 403b, 457, your IRAs, your brokerage accounts, your rental income. You might want to use other assets or other income sources and let this continue to get a guaranteed rate of return within PERS. So you got to know what your options are with Money Match. So these are just some of the factors that we take into account when we look at what calculation are you going to be under. And then from there, we can make really wise decisions and basically reinvest your pension back into PERS before you take it and say, let's keep waiting on this. And then we'll use other assets in the meantime if necessary, or you're going to work anyways. Perfect. We don't need the money. Wonderful. Now, there's so many different implications. If you need to get the PERS health insurance program, you need to be a retiree. If you're going to be under the OEBB's retiree health insurance, you have to be collecting a PERS pension. So these are all considerations that we want to take into account. But in its standalone, if you are Money Match, please know that sick time is not included, nor is vacation time. And please know that you delaying based on your age lets your account balance and your age factor go up, and thus will give you even more money when you do finally take your pension. That being said, there is a third calculation, and actually about 50 to 75% of Tier 1 members are going to be in what's called full formula. Now let's take a look from the lens of a Tier 1 person, because you have certain considerations that are only for Tier 1, like vacation time. So let's dive into this part here. Full formula takes into account 3 total factors. You have your final average salary times your years of service. And if you've watched my video on final average salary, I unpack all the considerations with sick time, vacation time, and so forth, as well as talking about the purchase of wait time and some other purchases you might want to consider. But just so you know, full formula for a Tier 1 member is going to be this final average salary times your years of service times a factor of 1.67% if you are in general service and 2.0% if you are in police and fire. That would also include deputy district attorneys, by the way. New PERS legislation came out just a couple years ago, and they put deputy district attorneys in the police and fire calculation. If I take 2% for police and fire and multiply it by 25 years, that would be 50%. And that's essentially what PERS is trying to do. They are trying to get half of your income replaced for life. So if I know that my final average salary was $100,000 and 50% of it is going to be replaced based on the 2% for police and fire times 25 years of service, then that is going to be $50,000 per year. If I'm general service, it's 30 years typically for most folks times 1.67%, and that's 50.1%. So effectively, the police and fire and deputy district attorneys, you're just getting to the 50% marker at 25 years instead of having to do 30 years. But that's effectively the only difference. Then from there, we look at that final average salary. Now we get paid out sick time at half credit. We also get paid our vacation time. And we, of course, get all 3 years that are the highest 3 years. It doesn't have to be consecutive for Tier 1. But we get all of that lumped together and then divided by 36 months. And that is what gives you your final average monthly salary. And that's what you would put into the calculation. So for example, if you have a lot of sick time or vacation time, then you will probably get a considerable boost in your actual pension. Typically for a teacher, for example, I see a boost of about 1,000 hours of sick time. That equates to about $300 to $500 extra per month for the rest of your life. So just so you know that these are important factors if you are in full formula. Let's say that you wanted to be done working and you thought, hey, Daniel just mentioned about, money match, that I could just stop working but not take the pension and it would continue to grow. That's not the case for full formula, because you have no more increased years of service and your salary doesn't go up because you're not earning anything. Then we don't have any considerations to delay the pension unless you are below what's called your normal retirement age. So for Tier 1 members, that is an age of 58. Basically means if you're general service and you didn't have 30 years of service, then you would have to wait till age 58 to get that calculation I just mentioned. So it's an important factor for us to understand that we do in fact reach that 30-year mark, or we wait till age 58. That's the only reason it would benefit you to delay the pension. Let's say, for example, that you're 55, your general service, and you have a salary of $100,000 per year. You would have a calculation of $50,000 a year. But if you have less than 30 years, maybe you only have 29 years, so close, then actually, not only is it not going to be that 50,000, it'll be closer to about 48,000. But because you wanted to take it before you're age 58 or have 30 years, well, now it's going to be penalized about another 20%, which means it's not going to be 48,000 anymore if you take it at 55. It's going to be about 39,000, because it's 7% reduction for 3 years is 21% reduction. So overall, your pension went down from 50,000 all the way to about $39,000 per year, or about $1,000 less per month, just because we didn't wait till we were that normal retirement age. So I know that that's a lot of factors to consider, but for most people, you're going to be able to get to that 30 years, or you're going to hit age 58 as a tier 1 member, and you're going to say, okay, this is how we actually get the full calculation for our full formula. Now, technically, Money Match would also factor in this normal retirement age benefit, but you have to, again, be 58 or have 30 years of service, and then everything becomes the same calculation that I mentioned before. PERS takes the higher of the last 36 months or the high three January to December, which is an important distinction for someone who's in a school district and you were an administrator for half a year this and half a year that. So you want to make sure that you're taking into account all these considerations. But once you have the information, most of you are going to fall into this 50 to 55% of your income being replaced by the pension if you are in this tier 1 category. If you're in Money Match, it's usually somewhere around 60, maybe 65% of your salary being replaced. It's back in 25 years ago when they were actually getting over 100% of their salary being replaced. But that's no longer the case because you haven't been contributing into your account balance for the last about 20 years since the IAP was created. But for tier 1 members, this is how you calculate your pension. I hope this has been helpful, but if you want to find out more, go ahead and reach out to our firm, Ryan Financial Solutions, or you can get my book on Amazon, Oregon Public Retirement. Until next time, happy planning.